Can artificial intelligence ever match the human brain in power? And follow-up question, can AI ever become conscious? Now, let me tell you about some developments in the world of neuroscience that might be able to give us an answer to that. And I'm going to try and explain it in a way that everyone can understand. Now, a few decades ago, the British scientist Roger Penrose suggested that there is some quantum effects that are taking place inside the brain, which might be the source of our intelligence and the source of our consciousness as human beings. Now, I don't agree with the consciousness part, and I'll explain why a little later. So in essence, what he was saying was that our brain is like a quantum supercomputer, and there is no computing power on Earth. There wasn't then, and many decades later now, there still isn't the computing power comparable to the human brain. Well, so that basically gave the answer to that. That even though AI might be able to mimic human behavior and human characteristics, like the ability of large language models like ChatGPT to be able to speak to us, so even though they have those capabilities, they will never match the human brain in intelligence. It's like looking at a statue, Michelangelo's David, and seeing that the statue is so realistic, so lifelike, that it might come alive. It's like that. So because it has strong resemblance to certain aspects of human beings, we feel like it's going to almost take on the full definition of a human being. And that's the fallacy, that's the mistake we make. So that's what Penrose said in the 1960s. But people laughed at him. Scientists made a mockery of him. They said this could never be. And so that was that. But recently some scientists, some of all people, anesthesists, started to do some studies on what is it that causes some gases to knock people out. So you'll see why now. It's anesthesiologists that are doing these studies. So they wanted to understand why certain inert gases like helium in sufficient quantities can knock out the human brain. And so when they did studies on this, they found that inside our brain cells, there are these things called microtubules. And inside those microtubules, there might actually be quantum effects taking place. Okay, let's pause here and explain what is a quantum effect and what is a quantum computer. Now, a quantum effect is something that happens on a very, very tiny scale, not even a microscopic scale, on a smaller than atomic scale. Now, when we talk about quantum effects and quantum physics, things happen in that world that are very different to what happens in the real world. Now, for example, in the real world, no object can appear in two places at the same time. But what's weird about the world of quantum physics is that certain particles can appear in two states at the same time. So we can't say that a person is asleep and awake at the same time. Or we can't say that a person is dead and alive at the same time. Or that a person is here and there at the same time. But in the quantum world, somehow, we haven't explained that this works. Then there's the thing called quantum entanglement, where two particles that could be very great distances from each other are able to lock with each other and almost lock in and keep the same phase and behave in exactly the same way. So it's like this. Let's say you've got a friend who is in the next room, and every single action that you take, that person does. So you raise your hand, you drop your hand, you look to the right, you look to the left, the person does that in exactly the same time. Now take that person and put them not in the next room, but in the next town or the next country or next continent or on another planet or in a distant part of the galaxy or in another galaxy. So this is entanglement, where you get particles that behave in the exact same way. They lock in with each other. Now, these are some of the weird things that happen in the quantum world. So what we have done as human beings is we started to explore the possibility of using these properties of quantum physics in computers. And so we've created what are known as quantum computers, which are extremely rudimentary at this stage. I mean, the technology is still very, very new. Now, what's the difference between a quantum computer and a normal computer? I can best describe this with an analogy. So the analogy is this. Let's take the biggest library on the planet, the Library of Congress, for example. And I read this analogy somewhere. It's quite interesting. If you need to search for a specific verse in a specific book, let's say there's no classification system. You just know that in one book, somewhere in this library, there is something written and you need to find it. How would you go about searching for it? Simple. Sequentially, right? You'll probably start at one side and you'll start searching. You'll open a book, you'll look at page after page after page, close it, next one, page after page, go to the next shelf, all the way to the end. Now that's how normal computers operate. That's how normal computers function. They are able to function in a sequential manner. Even though we might think that our computers are multitasking at any given time, but really, if you look at it on the processor level, they are not multitasking. They're just simply very quickly switching between tasks. But a supercomputer, on the other hand, a quantum supercomputer, because of its taking advantage of the quantum nature of atoms, of these particles, how would they approach the library search? This is how. A quantum computer will be able to access every book in that entire library all at once. Now, this is a very, very advanced quantum computer that we haven't developed yet. So what does this all tell us? This all tells us that the brain, the human brain, is such advanced technology. It's such an advanced quantum computer that we can't even imagine, because the very structure of the human brain makes it impossible that it's a quantum computer. Because as far as we know, quantum computers operate at very, very cold, extremely cold temperatures. They call that absolute zero, which is like minus 270 degrees Celsius. But the brain is warm. And the other thing about quantum computers is that they can't operate in a moist environment. But the brain, on the other hand, is full of water. So yes, there is some kind of quantum computer in the brain, but it's something that's so advanced that we can't even imagine. And that's the difference between the human brain and the dumb old computer that's sitting on your on your desk. Even though those are fascinating devices, but if you look at the technology there, the microprocessor technology there versus what's going on, the quantum effects that are firing up all over our brains, there's no even a comparison. So if you look at it from a purely technological perspective, in other words, then there is no way that even the most powerful generative AI or powerful AI can ever match the human brain, let alone get consciousness, because consciousness is something completely different. In fact, we can't even think about consciousness right now because we don't even have a proper definition of it. If you ask the psychologist, you'll get one definition of consciousness. If you ask the biologist, you'll get something else. If you ask the philosopher, you'll get something else. So we don't even know what consciousness is. And to say that somehow computers are going to become conscious is just naive. It's just people being naive or people trying to create a sensation. So that is why, in my opinion, and it can be scientifically proven, that an AI can never ever match the human brain, nor can it ever get consciousness.